Hello, welcome to Image Bearers. My name is Atoma Eji. So excited to have season 3. Our budget has been renewed. This is episode 37. We are very excited to have on the program Nadine Templer, who is the Senior Director of Volunteer Corps for Hope Worldwide. She is currently in Kathmandu, Nepal, and we're going to kind of go through just some various aspects of her life. But the main thing we wanted to do is just to talk about a book that is recommended for a lot of Hope Youth Corps, which is The Hole in Our Gospel. And really, I think a lot of us have had some time over the last year or so to reflect on our lives. And prayerfully, we can start to fill that hole that may be in our gospel with Jesus and really just be what he's called us to. So again, Nadine, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me again. This is fun. Thank you.
Yeah, I think when you were on the last time, you had a buzz cut, so your hair was a lot shorter.
Right.
And since then, you have grown some silver and really just taken it to a new level. So much, it looks awesome.
Thank you.
So on the program today, we have assisting Pam George, who's here in Michigan with me in Grand Rapids. We have Cheryl, who's in Tallahassee, Florida. We have, can you give a quick wave, Cheryl, so we know who you are? We have Elodie, who's in Seattle. And we have Nicoletta, who is in Massachusetts. All right. Well, let's go ahead and start it out. Elodie, why don't you take it away?
Okay. Well, I first want to say I'm super grateful to be here and get to know you a little bit deeper, Nadine. First, right, let's talk about this year that we've had, right? And I think it's safe to say that everyone was hit with COVID, some harder than others. But for those who may not know, I'd love for you to share maybe a little bit about how your husband is doing, who recently contracted COVID, and how, right, like how have you coped with it and how is he doing right now?
Well, thank you so much for asking. Yes, Mark was very, very sick. There were a few days where we didn't know if he was going to make it, which is pretty scary in a place like Nepal. He's doing much better. Mark is incredibly determined. He has a lot of energy. The doctors were pretty blown away by him. I'm not sure that I ever dealt with someone like my husband. But anyway, yeah, no, he's fine. He's still on medication, but he's doing much better. He's obviously back at work, full speed ahead. But, going through this experience definitely highlighted, and, we're talking about serving the materially poor today, but it highlighted the inequity in healthcare access, because we had, even though we're in Nepal, we had access to the best healthcare available here. But obviously that's not the case with most people. So we're very grateful.
That's so good to hear. And I'm amazed that he's already back at work. That's impressive. And I think kind of going back to COVID and the line of work that you and your husband have done for 20 plus years, right? You guys have seen people at their deepest, like their deepest hurts, their deepest pains, right? Their worst days, or I guess whole, right? So you could say, how has this book impacted the work that you and your husband have done?
I think this book expresses really well the importance of the whole gospel. I know the title is The Hole in the Gospel, but it highlights the whole gospel. And I think what's powerful about this book is that it's a personal story. It's the story of a very successful, rich, powerful man whose life was changed by being around the materially poor. And so I think it's really encouraging to hear how someone's heart can be transformed through experiencing relationships with people who are in different situations. So I love the book. It's one of those books that you read and it changes your life. I mean, we were already doing this work when I read the book, but I just found it very powerful, because when we started our work, and Pam remembers, we were young, we didn't have a lot of money. So for us, I mean, it was a sacrifice, but not that much. I think when someone who's a CEO of a company has that same transformative experience, I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. What would you say is the hole in our gospel, right? Kind of speaking to that title in this book.
So the premise of the book is that, in Western Christianity, we have focused a lot on evangelism and the religious side of the gospel, but there's a whole aspect of Jesus's life which was about serving, about healing, about serving the materially poor, healing the sick, reaching out to the marginalized. And unfortunately, in a lot of our churches, that is seen as a extracurricular activity instead of being an integral part of the gospel and of our faith. And so there's a hole in our gospel. There's a missing piece, which is a very important piece of the gospel. If you look at the life of Jesus and you look at a day in the life of Jesus, say the beginning of the book of Mark, Jesus was preaching, he was teaching, he was healing, he was helping, he was serving, and it was all one thing. The way that in a lot of our churches, and I'm not just talking about ICOC, I'm talking about, Western Christianity especially, and the Christianity we have exported to the majority world. There's a half of the gospel's missing. So that's the premise of the book.
Yeah, I like that. And in reading it, I also found that very personable, right, relationship, right, with
Yes.
the reader and the author. Can you maybe touch a little bit about how you and your husband got started in this line of work and what drives you 20 plus years later?
Sure. It's almost 40 years now. I'm turning 60 this year, so I'm no spring chicken. When we started, we went to India. We were baptized in London, and we went to India, and we wanted to, start plant churches. But for us, spreading the gospel was also about service. In our mind, it was never separated. And so when we went to India, we got to know people. We, tried to, blend in with the local communities and, sharing the gospel, but also reaching out to communities of leprosy patients or underserved communities, underserved schools, trying to provide medical care people didn't have access to. So it was very simple work, but it was all blended with church planting. It was all one thing. There was no, we're going to evangelize. Oh, and by the way, let's remember to serve the poor. No, it was one thing. And we were young, and in our mind, it was obvious that that's what we had to do. And so that's what we started. And to be honest, almost 40 years later, it's the same for us. At times we've been employed by the church. At times we've been employed by Hope. At times we've been employed in secular jobs. And it hasn't really changed what we do, because, we just look at Jesus and we try to do what he did. So it's very simple, really. We make it complicated, but it's really not complicated.
And it's usually the simple things that are a lot harder for people to do, right? In part 3 of the book, it's titled The Hole in Our World. And in this section, it kind of outlines some of the challenges that the poor face. Could you maybe please share about what you've learned, right, with what the poor face that the rich don't in your work with Hope? And yeah.
It's a lot. I mean, it's, the thing we think about is, they don't have food to eat, or they don't have shoes on their feet. Okay, so yes, that's there. But I think there's so much more than that. Even what I was sharing about this recent crisis, and it's happening right now. I mean, as of today, I'm sitting here in my house, the poor do not have access to medical care. So my husband was in a hospital, got really good care, very similar to what he would have got in the US. Meanwhile, there are people dying outside of government hospitals right now because there are no hospital beds, there is no oxygen available. And some of our friends in India have died. People we know, people Pam knows, people I know, and they don't have access to medical care. And I know that's not just in Nepal or India. In the US, people don't have access to medical care. So that's one thing. I think it goes so much further than that. I think what affects the materially poor is also a lack of respect from those who have more. And so, we tend to look down. There's a lot of prejudice towards people who don't have a lot. We think that somehow they're less than because they don't have money. And so a lot of the time it's a lack of respect that people experience. And that's very damaging, a lack of, giving them the dignity that every human being should have. When you're poor, you're marginalized. And you don't have to be poor to be marginalized, but being poor makes you marginalized. And so the broken relationships, the lack of mutual respect is really what affects the materially poor. So it goes beyond just what people think of, when they think, maybe they don't have enough food. It's so much more than that. It's just a lack of mutual respect. And I think that affects people even more in many ways.
Well, Nadine, this is Cheryl, and it's great to see you on here. I got to see you at the Hope Conference in San Diego and got to be part of your Empty Nesters group. It was great to hear that. I'm not an empty nester yet, trying to get there. But I wanted to ask you, has anything stood out to you regarding the disparity of distribution of the COVID vaccine in rich countries versus poor? And if so, would you please explain?
Yes, it's tragic. I know, for example, the US and, parts of Europe really suffered through COVID, but the recovery has been very fast, as people have had access to the vaccine. Here, the vaccine's just not available. In India, the vaccine's just not available. And so people just they can't get it, even if they want to. And I know in richer countries, people have access and may not want it. We don't have that luxury here. We don't have that choice. Yes, it's one of the things, inequity affects everything. And as I was sharing, in healthcare, it's very obvious. And so people here cannot get the vaccine even if they want to. Yeah, it's unfair. I don't know what else to say about it, but, it's very sad. People, my friends in India are telling me, we go to the clinic every day and they say, sorry, no vaccine.
Very, very sad. Very sad. How about in chapter 9 of the book? It's titled 100 Crashing Jetliners. How did that impact you? And how does the proximity help us better understand that the poor all over the world are made in the image of God and need our love and support?
Yeah. I love living in this part of the world because it has changed me. And, Mark and I have had the opportunity over the years to go back to, we lived in the UK for a few years in between. And then more recently, we lived in the US for 3 years. But I desperately wanted to come back. I want to be here. It's good for me spiritually, being around people who are materially poor, people who are struggling through, incredible challenges. It's very convicting, and it's helped me be a better Christian. I think being in this part of the world, being around people who don't have all the stuff, it makes the gospel so much more real. When I step out of my house, and we do have a nice house, because of my husband's job, but when I step out of my house, I see people who they may not have a lot materially, but they care for one another. There's a sense of community. There's a sense of we're in this together. The good of the group, the good of the community comes before individual desires or individual freedoms. And so that has had a huge impact on me, the way I live my life, the way that I, think about what I do. So it is very convicting, but I think it's kept me, I pray it's kept me closer to the gospel to live in this part of the world. I hope that makes sense. I mean, it's hard to explain, unless people have experienced it. But these communities are amazing. These people are resilient. They're courageous. The women in this part of the world, I mean, they just blow me away. They've transformed me. They transform my heart. And I love them for it. They're amazing. And so when we look down on the poor, thinking, they're less than, I think it's a grave mistake. We have so much to learn from these communities.
I agree. So many of the stories in the book, it's amazing. We are so spoiled in our culture. We have so much, and we just don't appreciate, like people who don't have appreciate so much. In Luke 16, we learn about the story of the rich man and Lazarus. And the rich man was not oppressing Lazarus, a poor man. He was just not doing anything to actively help him. He was essentially involved in the sin of omission. Yeah. Why do you think it's so easy for those of us in the West to get so caught up in the sin of omission?
So, living outside Washington, D.C., in the very nice suburbs of Northern Virginia for the last 3 years. We moved back here last August. So the 3 years prior to that, I lived in a very, very nice area. That helped me a lot personally, because I think if you live in that kind of world and you don't experience firsthand how the majority of the world lives, it's a very tiny bubble. And I think it's totally understandable how people who haven't been close to the materially poor would not understand, and so would not feel touched. It's very easy to be removed. I met someone while I lived there who, it's only about an hour by metro to go from the suburbs of Northern Virginia to downtown DC. And downtown DC has a lot of people experiencing homelessness. That person had lived in Northern Virginia for 10 years and had never been to downtown DC. Never been on the metro, not even once. It's very easy to live in that bubble, in that world, and so not being aware, not being touched by the stories, hearing the stories of people, interacting, building relationships with people who live a different life. And so if you're not connected through relationships, then you just won't know. And so it's very easy to become numb and to not be aware. So in the past, I would be very judgmental of people like that. I'd be like, why don't they understand? Why don't they care? But then living in that part of the world helped me understand how somebody could become like that. Now, we don't have to be like that when we live in those places, but it helped me understand how someone could become removed and unaware.
Hi, it's Nicoletta. I want to ask you some questions, Nadine.
Sure.
How did chapter 22, A Tale of Two Churches, impact you? Of a focus on internal versus external needs in our Western churches?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar to what we've just talked about. We are focused on our world, our needs, and I think what we need to do is step out of our bubble and get a reality check. I think in the Western church very often, there are needs, absolutely there are needs, but we can tend to be focused on our personal needs or the needs of our friends in our same circle, when there's a great big world out there. I think very often, I'm European, I grew up in France, so Western Europe, the US, Canada, probably, we live a certain way and we don't realize that we are the minority of the world. And now the terms people used are, what we used to call the developed world, it's called the minority world. And what we used to call the developing world is called the majority world. The vast majority of the world doesn't live the way we do. And so, but our Western church can be very self-focused and focused on our needs and, our feelings. And of course, there's nothing wrong with those things, but I think we need to look outward. And I think with the way the world is now and how global we are and communication, and we have no excuse now. We have no excuse to not be outward focused. And not just globally, but even in our own neighborhoods. Some of our neighborhoods are so segregated. We've got to step out of our neighborhoods. We have to go and reach out and cross the lines and go and interact and build relationships. Someone said once, I don't remember who it was, I think maybe Will Archer, but who is in your kitchen? Who is eating at your kitchen table? Is it the same people that you're always familiar with, or are you stepping out of your comfort zone, reaching out to people who live a different life, live in different circumstances, and invite them into your kitchen? And if we think about it, obviously with COVID, it's been a little tricky, but who is in your kitchen? Who eats at your dinner table? That's a really good test of how outward focused we are.
Thank you for sharing. So convicting and wow. Do you believe the youth see the role of the church the same way the older generation do? Please elaborate.
That's one of my favorite topics. The youth see the world differently. I think especially, Generation Z and the millennials to some extent, but I think the younger people are craving for a authentic faith, for an authentic church. They don't care so much about religion and rules, and they care about community. They care about their friends. They care about their neighbor. They care about social justice. A lot of us who are older in the Western church, we can, think, oh, social justice, let's not get political. But the youth care about social justice. They don't see it as a political issue. They see it as it's caring for our neighbors. It's caring for the marginalized. It's caring for the materially poor communities, but beyond that, the marginalized, groups of people who don't have the privileges that, some of us have. And so the youth are craving for, the full gospel of Jesus. The youth look at Jesus. I think a lot of us older generation, we look at the Bible, we look at the Word of God, we have a deep respect for the Word of God. And of course, that's totally right. But the youth really look at Jesus. And they look at the life of Jesus, and that's what they want to imitate. And then they look at the world, and they look at our churches, and they ask questions. And they're asking a lot of questions right now. And I think they're asking very valid questions. But I think they really want something which is authentic, relationship-based, community-based. They really want to care. They want to care for the weak. They want to care for people who are ostracized or marginalized. So I think there is a shift. it's a different kind of approach to the world, but to our faith. And I think because the youth are so global and so connected, I think, and they have traveled a lot more, I think they're very aware compared to the older generation. They're very aware of what's going on around the world and what's going on in our communities. So I think, yes, it is different.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I remember, I love that the youth course have starting from Romania, because I was part of the Romania. I was an orphan little girl in Romania, and how the youth corps came to Romania, and yeah, so yeah, and I've been part of the youth corps stuff, and yeah, I'm learning a lot as a youth, what it means to care about the poor and just have questions. You just, yeah. So another question: what are some of the things the church is doing well, and some of the things it needs to work on?
I love our church. Our church is my family. It's changed my life. And I am completely, 100% devoted and engaged. I'm very passionate about the work that we do, both with evangelism and service. I think what we do well is we really care. I mean, we're really, the churches are full of amazing people. Even recently, when my husband was, on the brink of death for a few days, I posted a message in one Facebook group, and thousands and thousands and thousands of people around the world prayed for him. That's something so incredible about the church. I love that. I think so many people are so sacrificial and giving, and I mean, just amazing. I think what we can do better, well, I think this whole topic of, we've got to be careful that we don't just become another religious group. I think we started very, very genuine when we started our churches. And I remember we used to talk a lot about serving and about, reaching out. And it wasn't just about evangelism. I think we have to be careful as our movement is getting older that we don't fall into, sometimes looking like the Pharisees, to be honest. So I think, and the youth can help us with that. I think the youth are our conscience. The youth are keeping us on our toes right now. They're asking the right questions. And sometimes, we can focus on, oh, they didn't ask it the right way, or, maybe their tone wasn't quite right. I think we have to look beyond that, and we have to hear the cries for help, the warnings. So I think really what we can do better, I think, is listen. Listen when people have concerns. Active listening is very much needed. So I think there's been a lot of talk recently about bridging the gap between generations. I think absolutely, there's got to be mutual respect and understanding between the generations. And I think the onus is on us, the older people. Okay, I just want to say that. I think for us, the older people, we need to take the initiative to ask questions and to listen. Too many times the youth have questions, they have concerns, and they're not heard. They're not listened to. We don't give them the respect they deserve. I work with youth a lot. I am just so impressed with them. I am so impressed with the young generation. They're amazing. They're so smart. They're so caring. They're so compassionate. Yes, they need mentoring, but you know what? They want mentoring. And I think that's something we can do better, is active listening to the youth, active listening to communities that are marginalized. I know it was sad last year how long it took us to listen to our Black brothers and sisters. I think we're getting there, but it was challenging at times, and I think we can do better. I think we can do better than that. So I would say, as a church, we just have to keep growing. I mean, we're known as a church that keeps evolving, and that's great. But I think we have to make sure we keep doing that. We keep learning, we keep listening, and we keep really caring. And, I think we have to be willing to change our minds sometimes. My mind's been changed a lot in the last couple of years.
Wow, thank you for sharing. Wow. In chapter 5 of the book, the title was Repairing the Whole. For those
Yeah.
who listen to this broadcast, what are the next steps people can take to start making a difference in addressing the issue our world faces related to poverty?
So the first thing we have to do is educate ourselves. We have no excuse if we're not aware. In this world today, with how much communication there is, we have no excuse. We can't say, oh, I didn't know. I think we've got to know. We've got to educate ourselves. We've got to step out. We've got to go to, wherever you live, walk around, go, get out of your car, go into the neighborhoods, talk to people. Don't be afraid. People don't bite, just go and reach out, be present physically, have those conversations. So I think that's the first thing. Travel. Once COVID is, I know it's been very challenging, but travel. I have found that people who have traveled, who have gone to different communities around the world, and that's what our youth are doing, they are then able to be much more compassionate in their own communities. I think if you go on a volunteer corps, even if you just go one time, go to a different part of the world, you're more likely to come back to your own neighborhood with more compassion and more empathy. So first thing is educate yourself. Second thing is advocate. Advocate. Use your voice. If you are in the privileged minority, use your voice to advocate. Speak up. Amplify the voices of the marginalized. Amplify the voices of the people who don't have access to what we have. They may not have a smartphone. They may not have a laptop. They may not have, the facilities we have, the education we have. Sometimes we're able to express things because we have the words for it. So advocate, share, talk, communicate, and then make some decisions about your life. If you're a young person and you're listening to this, the decisions you make now will affect the rest of your life. Think about the career that you're choosing. Think about the plans you have for your life, where you're going to live, what you're going to do. Are you just trying to make money, or are you trying to make a difference? So if you're young, I was so blessed to become a disciple at the age of 21. I was able at that time to make decisions for my life that affect the way I live today. And so that's a privilege. And if we are older already and we may not have that flexibility, let's still make decisions. How can we get involved? How can we engage? How can we make a difference? Starting with our own neighborhood. So, that's what I would say.
Oh, thank you. I can so relate, like educate myself. I'm like educating more about like reading this book. I'm like, I knew a lot of the things, but there was more things that I didn't know. So like being educated, and also like I volunteered not just to one core, youth core. It was few of them because I think because of the impact that youth core had on me when I was an orphan in Romania. That impacted me, and that's why I want to serve, because the impact. And there's a scripture you were mentioning, speak up, and it's in Proverbs 31:8-9. It says, speak up for those who cannot speak, for the rights of all destitute. Speak out, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy. Because that's what we are here for, to speak up for those who cannot speak up. And that's so. Thank you for doing that, Nadine.
Yeah.
You are a pioneer in this area.
Well, and I think, yes, speaking up for those who cannot speak up. But what I find is if we give them the chance, they can speak up. We just need to give them the mic. We need to amplify their voices. They do have a voice. And I think one of the dangers as privileged Westerners is that we think sometimes we can speak for the marginalized, or we can speak for the poor. And yes, we need to advocate, absolutely. But advocating is actually giving them the mic, is making sure that their voice is heard firsthand. Like I always say, I'm supportive of the youth. I love our youth, but I don't want to speak for them. I think they need to have the mic. So, I think that's also very important.
Well, Nadine, I don't know if you like baseball, but I'm going to throw you a curveball here.
I know nothing about baseball.
So I know you've read, I think it's Misreading Scripture Through Western Eyes.
Yes.
And I think part of our issue is is looking at the world from an individualistic standpoint. Yes. Can you share, I guess, just briefly, some of the aspects of that book in terms of how maybe you've seen culture in other
Yes.
Majority countries, and how that compares to, the United States, Europe, what have you, in terms of being individualists, and not necessarily in a good way. Can you share about that briefly?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's probably been the biggest change in my life. I'm an introvert. I like being by myself. I do fine by myself. COVID, being in confinement, I thrive on that. But I think being in this part of the world, and not just Asia, but I mean, I've been to Zambia and Kenya and, places, the Philippines, and I see a lot of the similarities where people really stick together. The community comes first. It's not about me and my rights and my freedoms. And, it's funny. People say to me, oh, it must have been so lonely for you. Mark was sick. You're in Nepal. I'm like, you have no idea. It is impossible to be lonely in this part of the world. I mean, in the middle of COVID, I took my husband to the hospital. Within 5 minutes, there were brothers in the lobby. And I was like, I don't really need you here. We're fine. They were like, no, we need to be here. And so I think, the community is always there. I was sharing with someone, some of the parents who have passed away, even in the church in India, it's tragic. And so we have orphans now in the church, and people are like, oh, what happens to those orphans? Do they need to be adopted? And I'm like, don't worry, the community is there. They're already adopted by their extended family. So, I think there's a very interesting story in the Bible, when Jesus was young and his parents were on a trip and they lost him for 3 days or whatever, how long it was. And to a Western eye, we think, oh my gosh, they were terrible parents. How could they not notice that their child was gone for 3 days? If you live in this part of the world, it totally makes sense, because people are always together. Like, your child is my child, your house is my house, your family is my family. So they were traveling in a big group. So Jesus's parents assumed he was being taken care of by some uncle and auntie, or, and so of course there was no worry, because this huge extended family, this community was obviously taking care of their child. So it took 3 days for them to realize that, a couple of days for them to realize that, oh, where's Jesus? Oh, he must be with someone. And so I think that explains the mindset. The group is together. So I'm, and I love that. As inconvenient as it can be sometimes when people show up at your house unannounced, or, people come and say, we're here, and they end up staying for 3 weeks, So, but at the same time, it's almost impossible to feel lonely. And I will say there's a lot less mental illness in this part of the world. Now, it's not like there's none. Of course, there is some, but the incidence of anxiety and depression and is much, much lower in these communities. So anyway.
Okay. Well, I definitely appreciate everything you're sharing. I think this book has been just an eye-opener. And I think you are someone who's lived this out with your life in so many ways. And the thing I appreciate about you is that although you're not, well, first of all, you're an introvert. So welcome to the club. But secondly, you're from obviously from a Western culture, but you took all those qualities, if you will, which can be looked at as deficiencies in some senses, and said, you know what, God is greater than that. And I'm going to go to different parts of the world, whether it's Zambia, whether it's the Philippines, whether it's Nepal, and really just serve. And I think through that, God has really just used you in incredible ways to, number one, learn for yourself, but also to really impact those, in those communities. And I always love seeing your posts on Facebook where there's something about, Volunteer Corps Alaska, Volunteer Corps, Mozambique, and San Diego, all these different places. There's always, I'm like, man, Nadine is always doing something incredible. And I know when we had you on the podcast before, I think just your heart to serve. It's easy to serve when we're young, like maybe Nicoletta, but I think as we get older, it's kind of like, ooh, I don't know, man. I'm kind of getting secure. My back hurts, but you're there. You're back out there in Nepal, and you're serving, and I think that's amazing. So I just wanted to commend you just for your heart, and I know you're an example to so many people. And so just thank you just for your service. What I wanted to do right now is just for us to get a chance to just share about the ways that you've impacted us. So I'll have Nicoletta, then Cheryl, and then Pam, who you've known a few years back, to share. And then Pam is also going to have a getting to know you session. So it's going to be some quick questions, but it should be fun. So Nicoletta, take it away.
Hey, Nadine, thank you so much for sharing and just for who you are. You've impacted me in so many ways, and you just you live the life like Jesus. You are like what I want to be when I am grown, but but that's my mission. That's my dream, is to be like you, because you are like someone I admire. I feel honor. I just respect, and I just feel so compassion and the heart that you have for the poor and needy. And that's how I feel when I go to third world countries. I come home like, no, I don't want to go home. I just want to be here, because this is, I feel like you're right, like the community, like their family, and it's just, you are just an inspiration, and you are just there's so many things I can say about you. I wish I could just come over right now and just give you a big hug, because you really are like incredible. I just love you so much, and just I want to be like you.
Well, I want to be like you, and you are amazing. And I have 5 kids, and 2 are adopted, and my oldest, the oldest of the 2 who's adopted, is turning 29. So when I think of you, I think of her. And just like you, she's giving back. She's in the full-time ministry, serving, and I think young people like you who have come from those, that kind of background, watching how, and there are so many of you, the way you give back, the way that you don't let the pain in your own life affect the way that you give. I think it's amazing. I have so much respect for you. Thank you so much.
Well, Nadine, like I said, I only got to see you at the Hope Conference, but I want to tell you what I appreciate is my daughter got to go to Budapest a few years back, and that she still talks about that trip, and she's 33. She will be this year, and she's just
a baby.
That was, pardon me.
She's just a baby.
Just a baby. Yeah, I know. I'm already 60, Nadine. I'm a little ahead of you. But anyway, she talks about that trip, and I remember her mentioning your name and just all the people. She just loved serving, and this generation and her generation they want to serve. And I think it's so important that we provide these opportunities, and all the work that you do to provide those opportunities for our youth. I am just very, very grateful for that.
Oh, what's your daughter's
Her name is Callie Spencer.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
She actually lives in Grand Rapids now. I didn't realize you guys were from Grand Rapids.
Well, thank you so much.
Did you want to share, Pam? You're on mute.
You're good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, Nadine. I am just so grateful that I got invited to this conversation, because it really gave me an opportunity to thank you for just the imprints that you have on my life. I think when you called me out of my comfort zone of just being in Chicago and said, come with me to India, and just to be able to walk with you, you kind of taught me how, you lived out Micah 6:8. Right now when I teach, I use that scripture all the time, what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. And I really appreciate just how you've helped me to have the heart for the marginalized, because it's influenced the career that I've chosen. All right, I am back. It's been 30 years that we've known each other, and you've taught me just to fall in love with Jesus. So thank you for that. And to be able to speak out of that love, that's one thing I'm grateful for. The second thing is just to value deep relationships. I remember our ragtag group of gang that you collected from all over the world, and we're still friends. Because you taught us that. You taught us to stay in touch. It's all about loving God and loving people. And if we got those things done, it doesn't matter what curveball life throws at you. Those two big blocks just keep you going. And that's what life is all about. And you gave that through your friendship. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And also, I just want to thank you for connecting me to my faithful husband. You got us together, so I will be forever grateful, because we are celebrating our 30-year anniversary next month. So I love you, Nadine. Thank you for walking the talk.
Thank you so much. It's been fun to be partnered with you so many years.
Yeah.
You're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. All right, I've got some fun get to know rapid questions for you. Are you ready? We get to know.
Yeah.
All right. What is your favorite cuisine?
Well, you're going to love that, Pam, because my favorite cuisine is Kerala food.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's the part of India that Pam's family comes from. It's the southwest tip of India. They have very spicy curries.
Yeah.
They use a lot of coconut.
Right.
And a lot of seafood. Oh, it's my favorite food. The flavors are unbelievable.
Yeah. All right. Well,
it's gotta be really good if you like it over French food.
Oh,
Yes, absolutely. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I've got to cook that for you, Thomas, sometime. All right. Do you like cake or pie? And what type?
I don't really like cake or pie. You know what? My favorite desserts are Australian desserts. The Australians know how to make desserts, and it's not really pie or cake. They have, they make like pavlovas and trifles, and oh my gosh, those are like the best.
Come on, international cuisine here. Now, what is your favorite film, or what do you watch?
Probably my favorite film of all times is Forrest Gump. I could watch it again and again and again. And I think, I mean, sorry, get emotional thinking about it, but talking about someone who was marginalized, and yet he was such an amazing person. And I love Tom Hanks as an actor, but yeah, that movie, I love that movie.
All right. Now, what is your morning routine?
I'm a morning person. I like my morning. So I get up early, mostly because I can't sleep. So I'm usually up early, and I have a habit from living in India for so many years. I need a very strong cup of what they call bed tea. Bed tea is the very strong cup of tea you have as you step out of your bed. So I can't get started before I do that. And then I get ready, make my bed, shower, whatever. And then I also make then a very strong pot of coffee. And I drink through that pot of coffee through the morning. We live in this amazing house here that, as I said, my husband's job gave us, but I go on the roof. It's a tall house, and I go on the roof and I have my time with God. I pray on the roof. I can see all of Kathmandu. It's amazing. So inspiring. My roof has been the best thing for my mental health for the last year. I do what Otoma does as well. I listen to books on Audible, and so I do that, and then I start work. So usually by around 7 or so, then I start work, and I work remotely. So especially with COVID, so I'm on my computer pretty much all day long, and that's what I do.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Now, how do you read your Bible? Do you prefer a paper Bible or a digital Bible?
Digital.
Okay.
I've gone digital. I mean, I still have a paper Bible, and I'm actually, I like the New King James Version right now. It's amazing. The New King James, but yeah, I mean, digital Bible. I work a lot with youth, and they've influenced me a lot. So I'm 60, but a lot of my habits are from a different generation. It's just because of these kids, they keep me on my toes.
All right.
All right.
Okay. I'm being like invisible woman here. Okay. What is your favorite Bible character?
Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's amazing. Yeah. Now.
Yeah, I mean, the way her life was changed, and the way that she was present, she was engaged, she was always there. She was at the feet of Jesus. She was at the cross. She was at the resurrection. She was in it, like, and I just love her. And, I named one of my daughters Madeleine because that's what Magdalene is in French. Yeah. So, yeah, she's amazing.
Great. That's great. What about outside the Bible? What is your favorite book or author?
Outside the Bible, I mean, the books we talked about today are amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. Like, this misreading scripture with Western eyes is transforming. I mean, my husband overheard me listening to it, and Mark, knows the Bible very well, but he was like, wow, this is great. This is great stuff. I mean, this book, I'm gonna write a blog post for Common Grounds on it. It's unbelievable. Everyone should read it.
Yeah.
Everyone in the Western world, especially. Yeah, it's incredible. And then, I have a master's in English literature, so I love 19th century literature. Thomas Hardy. I love those, Jane Austen. So
it looks like Pam froze, but I'll just keep going with the questions. What's your favorite book of the Bible right now?
The book of Luke. I love the book of Luke. I love the Gospels, but Luke is the gospel of compassion. It's the gospel where you see, I think that's the gospel where you see the whole Jesus. A lot of teaching, but a lot of healing. My favorite story in the Bible is in Luke 7, the widow of Nain. So, yeah.
Love that. I love that. That's one of my favorites too. That's awesome. Okay. If you were to recommend one book that someone should read in the next 12 months, what would you recommend?
I think this one, The Hole in the Gospel.
Okay.
I think if you haven't read it, read it. Yeah,
it's a great one. It's a very good book. I think I know the answer to this one. What's your favorite place to live?
Nepal. I've always wanted to live here. When we lived in India, we used to visit Nepal a lot, and it's always been my dream to live here. So I'm in my happy place right now.
So what happens when Mark says it's time to go back to America? Are you going to hide somewhere?
We're not going back to America. Sorry. I did my 3 years. I'm done. Unless we have to, obviously, we don't know what the future holds. But no, our plan is to stay in Asia, retire in Asia, die in Asia. If we can, if God allows it, that's where we're staying.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm trying to get my wife to let me go to Malawi, but she's we'll leave that alone. Okay. Where do you most want to visit?
One place I'd love to visit is Vietnam. I've never been to Vietnam. They speak French there. I've heard amazing things about the church there, about the country. I would love to go visit. If COVID lets us do so, I would love to go there with my husband for our anniversary this year. It's gonna be 35 years. So,
That's awesome. Last question. Are you team Apple or team Android?
Well, I think you'll know the answer to that. I'm around youth a lot, so I've switched to team Apple. I was so persecuted by my children and the youth.
Blessed are the persecuted.
For using a PC and an Android phone. I switched over. They told me, Mom, when you do, you're never going back. And you know what? They were right.
Now you need to convert Jeannie Shaw. She says she's still Android. So you have work to do. Well, thanks so much for coming on the program. It's definitely been just an incredible honor. Prayerfully, people will be inspired to read the book. And I think just by your life, you have shown it can be lived out. Whether a person's an introvert from the West, God can still work through all of us, as long as we love food from Nepal. There's hope for us. So definitely thanks so much for your time. Those of you that watch this episode, definitely please consider clicking like and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much.
Thank you.